I was almost kidnapped as a child. I grew up in a small beach town on the East Coast. It had that cliche suburbia vibe, complete with book clubs and block parties. My sister and I were close friends with our neighbors as they had a daughter, Kristen, around our age. A lot of time was spent playing together in our backyards, at the beach down the street, and our nearby park. It had been one summer day that my mom and Kristen's mom wanted to take us to a park. And as usual, as soon as we arrived, Kristen, my sister, and I raced to the swing set to claim our seats. Our moms had followed leisurely behind us, looking ahead to see if they could snag a spot in the shade. Once they found a picnic table, they sat down and set up. They started getting some snacks ready for us while occasionally glancing over to make sure we hadn't fallen off the swings. The afternoon was going well. Everyone was having fun and enjoying the weather when Kristen's mom pointed across to where we were playing. There, instead of just 3 girls swinging, there were 4. Seems like the girls made a friend, she smiled at my mom as they looked at the other little girl who had joined us. An older woman, most likely her mother, was standing off to the side as well. My mom nodded, thinking nothing of it. It was completely normal for kids to make friends at the park, and especially in an area so friendly. Besides, if anything were to happen, the older woman would be right there. Kristen and my mom talked for a little bit longer before my mom looked over again to check on us. When she glanced over to the swings, she saw Kristen. She saw my sister, but she no longer saw me. She stared for one more second as it sunk in, and she realized the older woman was also no longer there. Panic washed over her and she immediately alerted Kristen's mom. They rushed over, hoping I was just hiding behind the slide. My mom's eyes scanned over the entire playground, frantically trying to find me. She recalls Kristen's mom rushing to the others and asking them what happened, but before either of them were able to offer any information, she found me. The older woman had taken me by the hand and was leading me off of the playground, out of the gate, and into the parking lot. My mom began to run after her, yelling at her to stop. The woman did not pause, didn't even turn around to acknowledge my mom's screams until she was close enough to reach out and grab my one free hand. My mom immediately began to curse and question what the hell she was doing with me. The older woman began to explain how this was all just a misunderstanding, that she was only just walking me to the baseball field that was right across the street. Of course, this answer was completely unacceptable, and my mom was making this clear. Kristen's mom was also quickly catching up behind us. It appeared that when the older woman noticed Kristen's mom was there as a backup, she let go of my hand and began to offer some semblance of an apology before hurrying over to her car and quickly pulling away. And it was not until after she had already gotten down the street that my mom understood 2 suspicious details. 1, the direction the older woman was taking me was towards our parked car and not at all the baseball field. And 2, the older woman did not put a child in her car before she left, meaning she came to a playground of kids by herself. Thankfully, nothing happened, but I really hope that this was this woman's first and only time lurking around playgrounds trying to abduct kids. Weird ride home. So at the time of this, I was a 16-year-old girl, and I was traveling back home from school by train. While I was listening to some music and studying, I noticed a woman just staring at me. The kind of stare when you're doing something forbidden and get caught. She just looked me dead in the eye and whispered something to the guy sitting next to her. After, she then proceeded to whisper something to another man. Now, normally I wouldn't freak out, but they also kind of looked completely out of it, like they were under the influence of something. Then, at the next stop, it was my time to get off and I just noticed them walking behind me, still whispering to each other, but this time, I was able to make out some words. I couldn't understand a whole sentence, but they whispered something like, "Yeah, she's good." At that point, I just felt completely uncomfortable and just wanted to get home. I got off to the boarding area when the woman ran beside me and stopped in front of me. She was screaming something at me, which I couldn't understand because it was really loud at the train station. But I noticed that the two guys were behind me and slowly coming closer. The woman also stuck out her hands like she was trying to stop me from going. Now I really started to panic, so I ducked under her arms and started running. I heard them follow me for a couple of streets, but in the end, I managed to get away from them. This happened when I was about 16 years old. I have 5 younger siblings, and my little sister would have been about 5 years old. We lived in a bad neighborhood in the projects. Our neighbor was nice, but she always had sketchy looking people hanging around. One day, these two new guys started hanging out there every day. They'd always be outside smoking or just sitting on our porch. They made me really uncomfortable. They were always staring at me and would sometimes try to get me to walk over and talk to them. Or they'd come into our yard when my parents weren't home and talk to me. They asked me if I had a boyfriend and asked me if I wanted some beer or weed. I was a goody two-shoes Mormon girl, so I always told them no thanks and that I had to go inside. They were probably both around 30 years old or so. Then, they started coming over and asking to use our phone when my parents weren't home. My parents usually let the neighbors use our phone, so I never said no, but I would just pass it through the door and make them stay on the porch. They'd sometimes ask to come in or try to talk to me, but I would tell them no because my parents weren't home. Now I realize how dumb that was to tell them all that, because they could have just pushed the door open. But I was raised to always be polite and sweet. Anyway, we had a little dog and I always took him outside early in the morning. One morning I was taking him out. One of the guys came outside and stood there, staring at me for a few minutes, and then went back in. I brought the dog inside and just a few minutes later, there's a quiet knock on the door. I opened it, and both guys are there, and one says, "We just saw your baby sister out by the highway. You need to come get her." I panicked and ran outside with them. I started to run down our street towards the highway, and one of them says, "No, we'll drive you there. We need to hurry." I seriously took 2 steps towards their truck before I realized what I was doing. I stopped and said that I needed to go back inside and tell my parents, and the man closest to me grabbed my arm and jerked me towards the truck yelling, "We have to go now. She's going to get hit by a car." I instantly felt sick and just yelled, "Let go of me." He dropped my arm and I ran back inside my house. I ran into my parents' bedroom to wake them up, and my little sister was right there, sleeping in their bed with them. I woke everyone up because I was freaking out. My dad ran outside and the guys and their truck were gone. I never saw them at that neighbor's house again. I really wish I could say that my parents called the police or something, but they just kind of shrugged it off and made excuses like, maybe they saw another kid that looked just like your sister.